Everything you've ever known, your body, your mind, your memories, even the feeling that you are you, is part of an illusion. Not a mistake, not a glitch, but an intentional, sacred illusion so complete that you forgot you were dreaming. From the moment you opened your eyes in this world, you were taught to believe in separation. That there's you, and then there's everything else. You were handed a name, a story, a culture, a map of what life is supposed to look like, and you believed it, because you had to. You trusted those around you. But what if all of it, your fears, your ambitions, your sense of time and space, was never the full picture? What if reality isn't something that happens to you, but something that happens through you? This is the full story of Maya. Not just an ancient word or poetic metaphor, but the very force shaping your every experience. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. From your earliest memories, you've been taught to see yourself as separate from others, from nature, from the universe itself. The world around you was described in opposites, good and bad, right and wrong, self and other. It seemed obvious. There's a body here and a world out there. You feel joy, others cause pain. You think thoughts, others speak theirs. And yet beneath this surface-level certainty, something has always felt off. A quiet longing you couldn't quite name. Like something's missing, though you couldn't say what. That's the first illusion, Maya's most powerful mask, separation. The illusion of separation is not just spiritual, it's sensory. Your eyes show you distinct objects, your ears pick up only fragments of sound, your mind interprets each thing as isolated. But perception isn't reality, it's interpretation. You don't see the world as it is, you see it as your mind renders it. And that rendering has been shaped by systems designed to reinforce division. What if the boundaries between you and everything else aren't real? What if they're just temporary constructs, useful for survival, but meaningless at the level of truth? The particles that make up your brain can't be isolated from the environment. They're entangled, inseparable, interactive. And yet, here you are, taught to believe you are a single, solid, separate entity, navigating a world of others. Maya isn't a lie in the way we think of lies. It's not deception, it's distortion, a lens that warps infinity into individuality so convincingly that we spend our whole lives trying to return to what we never left. We are taught to look outward for meaning, purpose, salvation. But the sages of every tradition whispered something different. What you're seeking is within you, not metaphorically, literally, because there is no outside. The same consciousness that flows through all things flows through you. The ocean doesn't end where the wave begins. And that subtle longing you felt your entire life, that quiet ache you've tried to soothe with people, possessions, achievements, it's not weakness, it's memory. The memory of unity buried beneath the noise of separation. It's the deeper part of you remembering that this world of fragments was never the full story. Maya creates the illusion so that consciousness can experience itself through limitation, through contrast, through duality, not to suffer, but to learn, to evolve, to remember. And it's here, in this remembering, that the illusion starts to dissolve. Not all at once, but in moments. When you look into someone's eyes and forget where you end and they begin. When you lose yourself in a sunset, a song, a stillness, and for a moment, the boundary disappears. Those moments aren't accidents. They're glimpses of what has always been true. Because what you're waking up to is not just a new idea, it's your original state. Before you learned your name, before the story began, you were already whole. And though the illusion seems dense, remember this, it was made to be seen through. Maya is not an error. It's not a glitch in the matrix. It's the matrix itself, the mechanism by which the infinite becomes finite, the eternal steps into time, and the boundless pretends to wear a name and a face. To call it illusion is to miss its deeper brilliance. Maya is not here to fool you. It's here to give consciousness something it cannot know, in its raw, formless state, the beauty of limitation, the thrill of becoming. The ancient rishis of India didn't describe Maya as a lie. They described it as the divine artistry of the universe, the Shakti, the creative force that projects a universe into being, the way light casts shadows to give shape to form. Without it, Brahman, the absolute, the formless, the eternal, would remain unexpressed. Maya is the dance of expression. It is how the formless becomes the stars, the trees, the cities, the sounds of a child laughing and the silence between your thoughts. But to enter this play, the one must forget itself. That's the cost of the game. Like an actor who loses himself in the character so completely that he forgets the stage, the infinite becomes the individual and believes it. You were never meant to stay lost in the role, but the illusion is convincing. That's what makes it sacred. The dream is only powerful because it feels real. When you stub your toe, when you cry in heartbreak, when you fear death, those aren't illusions in the shallow sense. They are experiences. And experiences are the very reason consciousness fragmented itself in the first place. To feel, to taste, to touch itself through form. Maya is the mask worn by the divine to know itself in every possible way. But we made the mistake of thinking the mask was our face. We got so used to the costume that we forgot we were playing a part. We believed the story so deeply that we stopped questioning the script. Every layer of Maya is built to reinforce the role. Your name, your gender, your nationality, your beliefs, your goals. None of these things are inherently false. They're just not the whole truth. They're temporary containers through which consciousness moves. Like waves crashing on the surface of the ocean, they exist, but they're not separate. They're just the surface expression of something much deeper. And here's the paradox Maya holds. The more real it seems, the more effective it becomes. If you walk through life constantly aware that this is all a projection, you wouldn't feel the full range of what this reality has to offer. Love would lose its ache. Loss would lose its weight. Beauty would lose its sting. But by forgetting, you feel it all. And feeling is how the infinite grows. The Vedic sages spoke of Leela, the divine play. Maya is not the prison. It's the stage. It gives meaning to the act of remembering. And the remembering is everything. Because one day, the actor will glance in the mirror and recognize the face beneath the makeup. The dreamer will stir in the dream. And when that happens, the illusion doesn't vanish. It simply becomes transparent. You'll still live in a body. You'll still speak a name. But behind your eyes, a new awareness will shine. Not as someone who is seeking the truth, but as the truth who has momentarily chosen to seek. The sages of the Upanishads described the universe as a dream, projected by Brahman, the formless absolute. They spoke of Maya as the sacred veil, an appearance that seems real to the senses but dissolves under direct awareness. Thousands of years later, Buddhist teachings describe the world as impermanent, interdependent, and devoid of fixed identity. Taoists pointed to the dance of yin and yang, not as two things, but one movement perceived in parts. The Hermetic teachings from ancient Egypt whispered, "All is mind, the universe is mental." What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. It's shaped by you, by your perception, by your questions, by your awareness. Not because you're imagining it, but because you are participating in it. Reality is not a fixed stage, it's a participatory event. There's a question older than every religion, deeper than any doctrine, and it hides behind every thought you've ever had. Who is the one that sees? Not just with the eyes, but the one who notices the thoughts, the feelings, the rise and fall of the body. Who is that quiet observer behind the curtain of personality? You've worn many masks in your life: child, student, lover, friend, stranger. And each of these identities came with its own script, its own expectations. But through every role, there was something constant, something that didn't age when your body did, something that didn't leave when others did. That presence, that witnessing awareness, it doesn't belong to the roles you play, it belongs to what you are. And yet, most people never question the character. They live their entire lives as the mask, mistaking the temporary for the eternal. This is the most subtle aspect of Maya, the illusion of identity. The belief that you are your story. You were given a name before you understood what it meant. You were told who you were by those who didn't know who they were. You inherited fears, beliefs, wounds, and called them personality. Over time, you built a self-image out of memory, praise, rejection, and repetition. But identity is not essence. The person you think you are is a beautifully crafted illusion. A useful tool, yes, but not the truth. like a dream that feels real while you're inside it. The ego self, the I you refer to daily, feels solid. But when you ask, who am I, really? And follow that question inward, you don't find a fixed answer. You find silence, space, something observing everything but untouched by any of it. Ramana Maharshi, one of the most revered sages of modern India, made this question the center of his teaching. Who am I? Not to get a verbal answer, but to dissolve every false one. Because every answer is a layer of the illusion. Every title, every trauma, every talent, none of it can touch the stillness that sees it all. And that stillness is not unique to you. It is not personal. It is the same awareness watching through every set of eyes. The differences between people are differences in costume, expression, experience. But the one watching it all, that's the same presence, wearing 7 billion faces. This is what Maya hides, and paradoxically, what Maya reveals when you begin to wake up. It hides your true nature behind the mask of the self, behind the noise of thought, behind the performance of being someone. But the moment you become aware of the performance, something extraordinary happens. You no longer believe the character is the whole story. You start to sense the dreamer within the dream. And this is not a metaphor. Every night you fall asleep and enter a world where you run, speak, feel, fear, and rejoice, all while your body lies still in bed. The dream feels real until you wake, and then you say, it was just a dream. But what if waking up from this dream works the same way? What if death is just waking from the illusion of separation, of identity, of time? The more you begin to observe yourself, the less control the illusion has. When you watch a thought instead of becoming it, you begin to create space. When you feel an emotion but don't collapse into it, you begin to sense freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from changing the world, but the kind that comes from no longer being trapped by it. Because the truth is, you've never been just a character in this story, you've always been the author. But somewhere along the way, you started reading the book so deeply, so emotionally, that you forgot you were the one holding the pen. Now the story is beginning to shift, because now you're remembering. Maya is not just some mystical veil floating out in the cosmos. It's here, woven into the structure of your daily life. It's in the way you speak, the way you think, the way you respond without questioning. If Maya is the illusion of reality, then culture is its echo, and the most powerful illusions are the ones you never realize you've accepted. From the first day of school, you were taught not to think, but to remember, to recite, to obey. You stood when told, sat when told, asked permission to speak, and learned that being right was more important than being curious. Every gold star, every grade, every smile of approval, it wasn't education, it was conditioning. Conditioning to seek permission, to measure your worth by external standards, to believe that safety comes from fitting in. And so, a framework was planted, one where success means compliance, one where rebellion is punished, not discussed, one where asking the wrong question can make you the wrong kind of person. This is Maya's more subtle form, not just illusion of the senses, but illusion of self-worth. You're told who to be, what to value, what kind of life is worth living. And you rarely question it, because questioning threatens the identity you were given, and that identity has become the lens through which you see everything else. Carl Jung understood this well. He saw how individuals carry not only their personal experiences, but inherited stories, archetypes, and roles passed down through culture. You think you're choosing your beliefs, but often your beliefs have chosen you, picked up in fragments through repetition, symbols, stories, and the invisible pressure to belong. And then there's language, the oldest spell of all. Every phrase you learned growing up carried a hidden meaning. Don't talk back taught you that doubt equals disrespect. Be a good boy taught you that obedience earns love. That's just how it is. Taught you that resistance is futile. These words weren't just rules, they were scripts. And over time, those scripts became your internal dialogue. Even the stories you were told as entertainment weren't innocent. Think of the heroes, always chosen, always noble, always sacrificing their desires for duty. Think of the villains, always the outcasts, the rebels, the ones who refused to follow. You weren't just watching tales, you were being taught what kind of person to become. Maya isn't maintained through force. It's maintained through agreement, and most of us agree without ever realizing it. We agree to chase goals we didn't choose. We agree to smile when we're hurting. We agree to compete instead of connect. We agree to keep the system going, even when it exhausts us. And then, when something inside starts to ache, when you feel the quiet, persistent question rise, is this all there is? You're told it's just stress, or adulthood, or hormones, anything but truth, because the system has no place for someone who sees through it. But that question is a doorway. And once it's open, it's hard to close. Because deep down, you already know the system isn't real. The 9-to-5 grind, the hollow victories, the consumer identity, you know it's a performance. And what's more, you know you're not the role you're playing. You can feel the real you, just beneath the surface, watching, waiting, remembering. This is the psychological matrix, not built by machines, but by generations of unconscious minds, not enforced by tyrants, but by stories, screens, and social norms. And just like in a dream, the moment you realize you're dreaming, the illusion starts to lose its grip. The power isn't out there. It never was. It's in your attention, in your awareness, in your refusal to keep repeating what no longer feels true. And when enough people begin to see that, the matrix doesn't just crack, it collapses. At some point, if you're paying attention, the illusion begins to shimmer. Not in some grand mystical event, but in quiet, almost imperceptible moments. A pause in conversation where your mind stops grasping. A breath where the usual anxiety doesn't follow. A fleeting sense that you are not inside your thoughts but outside them, watching. It doesn't last long at first, but it's enough. Enough to make you wonder if the version of reality you've been sold is the full picture, or just a sliver dressed up as the whole. This is the moment the veil begins to thin. Not because Maya has failed, but because you were never meant to remain asleep forever. The illusion was always meant to be convincing. It had to be. Otherwise, the game wouldn't work. You wouldn't feel the triumph of remembering unless you first endured the pain of forgetting. But seeing through Maya isn't about rejecting life or detaching from the world. It's about perceiving with clarity. It's about no longer being hypnotized by the surface of things. You still walk through the same streets, eat the same meals, speak the same name, but something inside has shifted. The weight behind your identity, the tension behind your goals, the desperation behind your seeking, it loosens. And in that loosening, space opens up. Awareness breathes again. The ancient seers mapped this terrain in ways the modern world has forgotten. In Vedanta, reality is described in 3 layers. The first is prativasika, apparent reality, like dreams or illusions. The second is vyavaharika, functional reality, the shared world where things work, where society functions, where water quenches thirst. But beyond both is paramarthika, the absolute, the timeless, formless truth, untouched by thought, name, or perception. Most people never look beyond the second layer. They live in functional reality, assuming that its mechanics are the whole of truth. But the mystic sees through, not by denying the world, but by seeing it as it is, fluid, impermanent, interdependent, a dance of appearances, playing out on the canvas of awareness. And once you glimpse that, even for a second, you can't fully go back. It's like seeing the painting and then noticing the canvas. The story is still compelling, the characters still convincing, but you're no longer lost in the narrative. You become aware of the space between scenes, the silence behind sound, the presence behind personality. Maya doesn't vanish, it becomes translucent. You'll still experience pain, but now you can see it arising and dissolving rather than becoming it. You'll still think thoughts, but they'll pass through you like clouds instead of storms. You'll still play roles, but you'll know their costumes, and you'll wear them lightly. This is the return to presence, to the simple, unadorned awareness that's been with you all along. The same presence you knew as a child before you learned your name meant you. The same presence that watched your first memory form and will remain after your last one fades. It doesn't argue, doesn't explain, doesn't seek. It just is. And when you rest in that presence, even for a breath, Maya begins to fulfill its deeper purpose, not to trap you, but to wake you, to pull you so deep into illusion that the only way out is through. Not by running, not by rejecting, but by seeing. And the moment you truly see, even the illusion becomes sacred. Maya is often mistaken for a curse, a cosmic trick, a barrier between you and truth. But those who've walked the inner path long enough begin to see something else, something deeper. That Maya is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It is the veil that both hides and reveals. The paradox that conceals the truth while guiding you toward it. Not a trap, but a design. Not punishment, but purpose. Imagine this: infinite consciousness, untouched and eternal, pure being without form, without story, without other. What would it know of love without separation? What would it know of growth without limitation? What would it know of beauty without contrast? It wouldn't. And so it projects itself into time, into space, into matter. It chooses to forget itself so that it can rediscover itself in every possible way. Through you, through me, through every life, every heartbreak, every sunrise. Maya is the canvas upon which the formless paints experience. The problem isn't that Maya exists. The problem is that we mistake the painting for the painter. We become so enchanted by the brushstrokes, identity, success, pleasure, pain, that we forget what's holding the brush. But forgetfulness was always part of the game. The forgetting creates the conditions for remembering. And the moment you remember, even the most painful chapters of your story begin to reveal a strange kind of grace. This is the deeper function of Maya. It doesn't just veil the truth, it reveals it through experience. Every desire you've chased, every fear you've run from, every role you've played, each was a lesson in disguise. Not to keep you stuck, but to bring you closer to the one thing you could never lose: your own awareness. The Gita says, "This Maya of mine is difficult to overcome, but those who take refuge in me cross beyond it." That me isn't a person or deity, it's consciousness itself. The only way out of Maya is not through resistance, but through return. Returning to the awareness behind the experience. Returning to the presence that was never fooled, even when you were. And the return doesn't require withdrawal from the world. It's not about renouncing possessions or isolating in a cave. The world doesn't need to be escaped. It needs to be seen clearly. Every interaction, every irritation, every joy is an invitation. To wake up, to see through the mask without needing to tear it off, to participate in the illusion with eyes open. This is what the mystics meant when they spoke of the world as divine play, not chaos, not randomness, but theater. The sacred drama through which the one becomes the many, and the many slowly begin to remember they were always one. And in this remembering, something softens. You stop fighting life. You stop needing it to go a certain way. You stop seeing challenges as punishments and start seeing them as teachings. The heartbreak that shattered you becomes the force that opened you. The loss that emptied you becomes the space that revealed something deeper. The fear that once paralyzed you becomes the doorway through which you stepped, trembling into truth. Because Maya doesn't just show you what you are not, it leads you to what you are. Through false identities, you find the real. Through impermanence, you sense the eternal. Through limitation, you rediscover freedom. And that's the cosmic joke. You were never really lost. You were playing hide and seek with yourself. And Maya was the game board all along. When the illusion starts to crack, the question arises almost immediately: if this world isn't ultimately real, then what is? If my memories, my identity, even my thoughts, are all subject to change, to distortion, to disappearance, what am I left with? And here's where Maya does her final trick. She doesn't just dissolve the world you thought was solid, she opens the doorway to a new definition of real. You've been taught to think of reality as physical. If you can touch it, measure it, weigh it, it's real. But what about the things that can't be measured? What about love, presence, consciousness, awareness? You've never seen a thought under a microscope, but it shapes your entire world. You've never touched a moment of peace, but you know when you're in it. Maybe reality isn't about density, it's about depth. And maybe the things that last the longest can't be seen at all. The Upanishads describe the world as neti neti, not this, not that. Every time you try to define reality by what it looks like, sounds like, or feels like, you miss it. Because it's not something that appears, it's the awareness that allows appearance. And once you get that, really get that, you start to understand. It's not the objects of the world that are real. It's the space in which they appear. That space is you, not the you with a name and a story, but the quiet, unchanging awareness that's been watching it all unfold. The one that never ages, never panics, never clings. That's what's real. Everything else, the drama, the dreams, the decorations, comes and goes. But that doesn't make the world meaningless. In fact, it makes it sacred. Once you know it's a dream, you stop being a prisoner and start becoming a lucid participant. You stop grasping at outcomes and begin to experience. You stop trying to control and begin to witness. And in that witnessing, you don't lose connection, you find it. Because the more you understand Maya, the more you realize it's not about escaping reality. It's about transforming how you see it. The illusion was never a punishment. It was a training ground, a mirror, a teacher in disguise. And once you stop trying to bend the dream to your will, it starts to teach you everything it was always meant to. This is why ancient traditions didn't ask you to reject the world. They asked you to purify your vision, to stop looking through the lens of fear, desire, and separation, to see what's behind the form. Because when you do, something profound happens. You begin to act in alignment with truth. You speak with compassion, not because it's morally correct, but because you know you're speaking to yourself in another form. You forgive not because it's noble, but because you see the futility of holding resentment in a dream. You let go not out of weakness, but because you finally understand that nothing real can be lost. And here's where most people misunderstand awakening. They think it means floating above life, detached and untouched. But true awakening isn't detachment, it's intimacy. You don't lose your humanity. You reclaim it, fully. You feel more, love deeper, see clearer. You cry without shame. You laugh without reason. You give without needing something in return. And when that shift happens, everything becomes medicine. Even your mistakes, even your shadows, even your old conditioning. Because now you see it all for what it is. A movement within the dream. A ripple in consciousness. Not something to fix or fight, but something to learn from and let go. This is what real freedom feels like. Not escape, but presence. Not numbness, but clarity. Not a new set of beliefs, but the absence of illusion. You stop needing certainty and start trusting the unknown. You stop chasing purpose and start embodying it. And if there's one thing you take from this, it's this. Maya was never your prison. It was your path. Now that you've seen through the illusion, what do you do with it? This is where most people hesitate. When the structures you've leaned on begin to dissolve, when the beliefs you clung to no longer make sense, there's a temptation to withdraw, to pull away from the world, retreat into silence, or seek isolation under the guise of being awake. But awakening isn't about disconnecting. It's about re-entering life with eyes wide open, not as the character, but as the awareness playing the role. Not to escape the dream, but to dream consciously, deliberately, with presence. You're still here, in this human form, living through the senses, moving through time. And yet, something inside is now free, untouched by fear, not defined by roles, no longer hypnotized by noise. You don't have to abandon the world. You just have to stop mistaking it for the whole truth. This is where Maya reveals her most profound gift. She wasn't placed before you to deceive you forever. She was meant to lead you back to yourself. Every illusion she crafted, every identity you wore, every joy and heartbreak you lived through, it all brought you here. Not to the end of the story, but to the beginning of your real life. Because now, you can live not from conditioning, not from fear, not from expectation, but from clarity. And this clarity is powerful. It doesn't scream, it doesn't argue, it simply sees. And in seeing, it acts. Not to fix the world, but to express what's true. When you live from that awareness, you become the dreamer who knows he's dreaming. You still show up for work, still face challenges, still have conversations, but you're no longer consumed by the noise. You're aware of the silence beneath it all, the stillness that was always there. And here's the quiet revolution. When you begin to live from awareness, the illusion loses its grip. You no longer chase meaning, you generate it. You stop looking for permission to be yourself. You simply are. And when others feel that in you, something shifts in them too. Because authenticity is contagious. Awareness spreads not through preaching, but through presence. That's why your awakening matters. Not just for you, but for everyone around you. The system that thrives on unconsciousness fears nothing more than people who see clearly, live fully, and act from truth. One awakened individual walking through the illusion with love, with clarity, with grace that's more powerful than any protest or ideology. You've already begun the process of remembering, but remembering is only step one. Now it's time to embody it, to live from it, to let awareness guide your choices, your creativity, your connection with others. The dream hasn't ended, it's just become lucid. And from this point forward, you're not just a passive observer, you're a conscious participant. You begin shaping the illusion from the inside, not to manipulate it, but to infuse it with meaning, with integrity, with love. Let this be your turning point, not a call to abandon the world, but to walk back into it with presence. Speak from truth, act from love, create with intention, and most of all, don't fall asleep again.
I want you to hold me, come and lay with me. Set aside your problems with me, baby. Save your conversation for the basement. I want you speaking in tongues. You know what they say about those. They come together like we're together. You can't let them slip away. You can't let them slip away. We got everything together, so unpredictable. But one thing I know for sure, you turn my sixes to nines. Frequently fly, we can't deny. Speeding tonight, I know I'm weeping when I look in your eye, and you're holding me tight. Where I love you and you turn my sixes to nines. You turn my sixes to nines. I want you to hold me, ride this with me. Set aside your inhibitions, maybe. Sometimes when it feels right, maybe it's alright. I want you speaking in tongues. Know what they say about those. They come together like we're together. You can't let them slip away. You can't let them slip away. We got everything together, so unpredictable. But one thing I know for sure, you turn my sixes to nines. Frequently fly, we can't deny. Speeding tonight, I know I'm weeping when I look in your eye, and you're holding me tight. Where I love you and you turn my sixes to nines. You turn my sixes to nines. You turn my sixes to nines. Frequently fly, we can't deny. Speeding tonight, I know I'm weaken when I look in your eye, and you're holding me tight. We're in love, you and I.